Ryan Abraham, one of the first people I thought about when the news on USC and UCLA and the Big Ten hit was him. I texted him. He said, check back with me. He's nice enough to join us. InsideTroy.com joins us on this day in college athletics we'll remember for a long time. Ryan, thanks for your time. What's been the feedback from Southern Cal fans?
You know, that's a funny question because I assumed it was going to be all positive. And I put a Twitter poll out soon afterwards, and it's about 55% positive and 45% negative. I've had some USC super fans reach out to me saying that they don't like it because of the travel and things like that. But I don't think they're grasping the big picture of how college football is changing so quickly. And there was no way, if you're USC, when you're competing for national championships, you have top 3 classes, right? I don't think they would be able to continue to do that against Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia if those conferences and those schools are, you know, if they're making 3 times as much money in TV money than USC is. And that's what looked like was going to be happening with these new TV deals coming for the SEC and the Big Ten. So I think to stay competitive, you have to make a move like this. But I don't, at least the initial reaction, the fans haven't been all that happy about it. I mean, for the most part, they're happy, but there's a lot more fans that are upset about it than I expected them to be.
Ryan, did this start last year when the first big ripple happened with Texas and Oklahoma?
I think so. I think that's a big piece of this puzzle. But I talked to Mike Bone in 2020 about this just because, USC, when Larry Scott was running the Pac-12, USC didn't have great athletic directors. Pat Hayden, they just accepted deals where USC was making as much money as Oregon State was or Colorado. And that's just, and USC's bringing all this, TV revenue and cachet to the conference. And I felt like that wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to be sustainable, but that's kind of the way Larry Scott wanted it. George Kliavkoff comes in, focuses more on making the playoffs, focuses more on your marquee programs. And I asked, Mike Bone about just what they were going to do. At the time, Larry Scott was still a commissioner. He told me everything was on the table. They could look to go independent. They could look to join another conference. So you knew they were at least going to explore it. And I thought you had to no matter what, because if you explore it, you could at least get a better deal from the Pac-12 if they know that you could potentially leave. USC wasn't going to potentially leave before. They didn't have the tough enough leadership. Now they do. And he took it another step. He didn't just explore going somewhere else. It looks like they're going somewhere else. So it's a huge move, but man, it's one I really didn't see coming.
Right. Well, Ryan, that kind of answers, I guess, part of my next question. Smokey asked you what the fans' reaction have been. What was your reaction? And when did this first kind of get on your radar? Was it this morning like everybody else, or did you have a little bit of a heads up?
No, I was at the Elite 11, quarterback finals. It's in Redondo Beach, right near where I live, covering USC has a quarterback commit there, Malachi Nelson. There's a whole bunch of top-level quarterbacks that are there, and that's what we were going to cover today. And then we get the tweet from John Wilner, who does a great job covering the Pac-12, and then just had to drop everything and run in the studio and start talking about it. But I didn't know the timing. I mean, I knew USC would explore, and I thought that things would kind of leak where, hey, USC could potentially go here, or maybe they'll go independent. And sort of leading up to the Pac-12's media, new media deal in 2024, USC would have a bigger say in that. But man, it looked like, kind of similar to a contract. The Pac-12 TV deal is up 2 years from tomorrow. So apparently, one of the reporters from CBS Sports was talking about this was the last day to inform the Pac-12 without having some sort of financial repercussions for leaving. So this seemed like a very strategic move. All the things kind of happened at once. But yeah, to have it happening today, I was completely blindsided by it. Just, covering some recruiting event, not this.
Do you think there's any way Lincoln Riley knew this was in the works when he took the job?
I don't think so. I mean, so Mike Bone has definitely, this not like it didn't come up today. It could have, they could have like hinted at, hey, we're going to look, because they talked about, building new facilities and getting more, money that way. And that could have been something that was enticing. Hey, we could potentially even leave the Pac-12. But I don't know if they were far enough along when he was hired on.
Right.
I think the hire, though, does help USC because USC was 4-8 last year. They're still like the marquee reason you would want to bring in the LA schools, right? It's USC. But they were a team that's been bad. They've been bad for quite a while. But once they hired Mike Bone, once they brought in Lincoln Riley, it showed the Big Ten, hey, this program's serious about football now. So I think he certainly helped with the deal. I just don't know if he was. I don't think he was involved, or I don't think he was really informed much earlier than probably everyone else was.
Ryan, I know we have you just for a few minutes because you have another hit at 5:40 Central Time. Have you thought about what this means to the Rose Bowl? Is that even like a factor on anybody's radar?
No, it is. I've heard people talk about it, and a lot of USC fans that were upset about it mentioned the Rose Bowl because it's a great tradition. Like USC's won 25 Rose Bowls, more than any other program's even gone to. They're a big part of the Rose Bowl and the tradition and the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. But I think, you're going to go to the Big Ten, you could still go to the Rose Bowl. And the Rose Bowl's changing. I mean, college football's changing. When the playoff comes, I know the Rose Bowl traditionalists are hanging on to that as much as they can. And I think you could still make it an amazing game, but it's just going to be different than what it was before. When you have the most prominent team the team that's gone to the Rose Bowl the most, moving conferences, it's definitely going to change the landscape, of that game. And UCLA plays in the Rose Bowl for their home game, so there's certainly a lot of ties there. But I don't think, at any bowl game, I think the Rose Bowl can kind of stand up to the new landscape of college football. But they're going to have to embrace some changes that I think they've been reluctant to accept, and the date might change. The conference affiliations might change. I think a lot of that stuff is going to change because USC and UCLA are leaving the Pac-12.
Can the Pac-12 keep this thing together, or is it just now, paddling the boat until everybody decides where they want to go?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think if you look at, I talked to people, national writers and stuff about this. I think USC and UCLA, if you compare them to Texas and Oklahoma, the overall cachet and national brand awareness, you got to give the edge to Texas and Oklahoma just because UCLA is just not as strong as a USC is. But I think it's more devastating to the Pac-12 to lose USC and UCLA than Texas and Oklahoma for the Big 12. It's like 2 torpedoes in your side for the Big 12. It's probably like 4 torpedoes in your side for the Pac-12. You're trying to put a bullet hole in a Band-Aid here. I don't know what George Kliavkoff can do, who, by the way, 1 year on the job as of tomorrow. What an anniversary present for this one. If anyone could put it together, I really like what he's been doing, but Larry Scott just kind of put him in a really tough spot. So I don't know if they're going to be able to keep it together. The Big 12 already got the best group of 5 teams that were available out there. If you bring in Boise State and San Diego State and Fresno State, what does that really do? I think Oregon's going to be chomping at the bit to leave. And they're going to be next up. There's potential for Utah, for Washington, for Colorado. So I think it's going to be really tough for Larry Scott to keep this together. If anyone can, it's him. But he was just put in a really tough spot.
Do you think that there's already? I guess everybody's just wondering kind of the same things. But do you think there's other Pac-12 teams that are negotiating potentially with the Big Ten right now that this thing's not quite done, or do you think that it's going to be the LA schools and that's kind of what they're good with?
From some of the reports I saw, it sounds like there's still more Pac-12 schools on the radar there. I think Oregon, you would be silly to not.
Sure.
And it's a great brand, and Oregon's got to be extremely upset that UCLA left before they would. And I talked about this when the Texas-Oklahoma news broke, and I said, hey, if someone poaches the Pac-12, there's no scenario that USC wouldn't be involved in. But every other school could be left out. And Oregon fans got on me. They're like, there's no way Oregon would be left out. They might not be, but there was definitely a scenario where it was a package deal with USC and UCLA, and they move on and then just take those 2 schools. And that looked like what's happening. They're probably in the best spot because if they put the notice in today, they'll have less financial, I guess there wouldn't be any kind of financial penalty to leave when the TV deal's up in 2024. So Oregon can still do it, but it might be a little more painful for them too. But they're going to be a desirable, they're a desirable brand that people would want in their conference. So I think the SEC started this war with the Texas-Oklahoma thing, and now the Big Ten's, firing their shot. And I just think it's a matter of time before the schools like Oregon and Washington kind of come along for the ride somewhere, or the Big 12 and the Pac-12 merge together, something like that. There's got to be something big. This can't be a standalone event.
If they lose any more other than UCLA and USC, Paul brought this up, if they lose a couple, do you feel like then they're crippled?
Done. Because, you have programs like Stanford that I don't even know if they want to play this game. Like they might bow out and say, we're not doing NIL. I know we went to a bunch of Rose Bowls and we had like top 5 teams for years, Jim Harbaugh and early David Shaw, but this doesn't seem like a Stanford thing. Like Stanford does their way. The way college football is going, I think they could opt out of this. And, the Oregon States of the world, the Washington States, like, what are you going to do? They're going to be Mountain West teams. So if like an Oregon or Washington leave, there's nothing really left to save. And it's going to be kind of like every man for themselves, kind of figure out what the best, landing spot is. And it could be a boom for the Mountain West. They probably get a lot of good programs for the Pac-12.
Ryan, I don't know when I'll get to ask this again, so I got to reuse a question I asked earlier, but what was your favorite memory from the Alliance?
I mean, I think when the questions were asked about what kind of contract was signed, and they were just said, it's a handshake deal.
Yeah.
So this has a very similar feel to when the SEC sort of stabbed the Big 12 in the back and Bob Bowlesley when they're negotiating the playoff and then steals their 2 best programs. Same sort of thing. Like, Kevin Warren over at the Big 10. Yeah, we'll have a deal with you, but we're going to do what's best for us. And I think there was some hope that because they made an alliance that the Big 10 wouldn't come calling and poach the Pac-12 schools, but I never thought that was like a realistic thing. I don't know what happened this quickly, but that's probably my favorite thing. Oh, there's nothing in writing. Just a handshake deal. Like, yeah, that went away quickly.
Crazy.
Ryan,
Crazy.
Thank you very much on this wild day that we experienced about 11 months ago and you experienced today. Thanks for your time. I know you've been crazy. At Inside Troy on Twitter, USCfootball.com. He does a great job with the Trojans. Chris Vanini, this is a fun